As you have seen, and the media has obsessed over, I have fired a number of senior officers since taking over. The previous chairman, other members of the Joint Chiefs, combatant commanders, and other commanders. The rationale for me has been straightforward. It's nearly impossible to change a culture with the same people who helped create or even benefited from that culture, even if that culture was created by a previous president and previous secretary. My approach has been simple. When in doubt, assess the situation, follow your gut, and if it's the best for the military, make a change. We all serve at the pleasure of the president every single day. But in many ways, it's not their fault. It's not your fault. As foolish and reckless as the woke department was, those officers were following elected political leadership. An entire generation of generals and admirals were told that they must parrot the insane fallacy that, quote, our diversity is our strength. Of course, we know our unity is our strength. They had to put out dizzying DEI and LGBTQI+ statements. They were told females and males are the same thing, or that males who think they're females is totally normal. They were told that we need a green fleet and electric tanks. They were told to kick out Americans who refuse an emergency vaccine. They followed civilian policies set by foolish and reckless political leaders. Our job, my job, has been to determine which leaders simply did what they must to answer the prerogatives of civilian leadership, and which leaders are truly invested in the woke department, and therefore incapable of embracing the War Department and executing new lawful orders. That's it. It's that simple. So for the past 8 months, we've gotten a good look under the hood of our officer corps. We've done our best to thoroughly assess the human terrain. We've had to make trade-offs and some difficult decisions. It's more of an art than a science. We have been and will continue to be judicious, but also expeditious. The new compass heading is clear. Out with the Shirellis, the McKenzies, and the Millies, and in with the Stockdales, the Schwarzkopfs, and the Pattons. More leadership changes will be made, of that I'm certain. Not because we want to, but because we must. Once again, this is life and death. The sooner we have the right people, the sooner we can advance the right policies. Personnel is policy. But I look out at this group, and I see great Americans. Leaders who have given decades to our great republic, at great sacrifice to yourselves and to your families. But if the words I'm speaking today are making your heart sink, then you should do the honorable thing and resign. We would thank you for your service. But I suspect, I know, the overwhelming majority of you feel the opposite. These words make your hearts full. You love the War Department because you love what you do, the profession of arms. You are hereby liberated to be an apolitical, hard-charging, no-nonsense, constitutional leader that you joined the military to be. We need you locked in on the M, not the D, the E, or the I, not the DEI or the DIE of dime. By that I mean the M, military, of the instruments of national power. We have entire departments across the government dedicated to diplomatic, informational, and economic lines of effort. We do the M. Nobody else does. And our GOFOs need to master it in every domain and every scenario. No more distractions, no more political ideologies, no more debris. Now, of course, we're going to disagree at times. We would not be Americans if we didn't. Being a leader in a large organization like ours means having frank conversations and differences of opinion. You will win some arguments, and you will lose some arguments. But when civilian leaders issue lawful orders, we execute. We are professionals in the profession of arms. Our entire constitutional system is predicated upon this understanding. Now, it seems like a small thing, but it's not. This includes as well the behavior of our troops online. To that end, I want to thank and recognize the services for their new proactive social media policies. Use them. Anonymous, online, or keyboard complaining is not worthy of a warrior. It's cowardice masquerading as conscience. Anonymous, unit-level social media pages that trash commanders, demoralize troops, and undermine unit cohesion must not be tolerated. Again, O3s, E6s. Sixth, we must train and we must maintain. Any moment that we are not training on our mission or maintaining our equipment is a moment we are less prepared for preventing or winning the next war. That is why today, at my direction, we are drastically reducing the ridiculous amount of mandatory training that individuals and units must execute. We've already ended the most egregious. Now we're giving you back real time. Less PowerPoint briefings and fewer online courses, more time in the motor pool, and more time on the range. Our job is to make sure you have the money, equipment, weapons, and parts to train and maintain, and then you take it from there. You all know this because it's common sense. The tougher and the higher the standards in our units, the higher the retention rates in those units. Warriors want to be challenged. Troops want to be tested. When you don't train and you don't maintain, you demoralize. And that's when our best people decide to take their talents to the civilian world. The leaders who created the woke department have already driven out too many hard chargers. We reverse that trend right now. There is no world in which high-intensity war exists without pain, agony, and human tragedy. We are in a dangerous line of work. You are in a dangerous line of work. We may lose good people. But let no warrior cry out from the grave, "If only I had been properly trained." We will not lose warfighters because we failed to train or equip them or resource them. Shame on us if we do. Train like your warriors' lives depend on it, because they do. To that point, basic training is being restored to what it should be: scary, tough, and disciplined. We're empowering drill sergeants to instill healthy fear in new recruits, ensuring that future warfighters are forged. Yes, they can shark attack, they can toss bunks, they can swear, and yes, they can put their hands on recruits. This does not mean they can be reckless or violate the law, but they can use tried and true methods to motivate new recruits, to make them the warriors they need to be. Back to basics at basic as well. Of course, and you know this, basic training is not where mission readiness should end. The nature of the evolving threat environment demands that everyone, in every job, must be ready to join the fight if needed. A core credo of the Marine Corps is every Marine a rifleman. It means that everyone, regardless of MOS, is proficient enough to engage an enemy threat at sea, in the air, or in a so-called rear area. We need to ensure that every member of our uniformed military maintains baseline proficiency in basic combat skills, especially because the next war, like the last, will likely not have a rear area. Finally, as President Trump rightly pointed out when he changed the department name, the United States has not won a major theater war since the name was changed to the Department of Defense in 1947. One conflict stands out in stark contrast: the Gulf War. Why? Well, there's a number of reasons, but it was a limited mission with overwhelming force and a clear end state. But why did we execute and win the Gulf War the way we did in 1991? There's two overwhelming reasons. One was President Ronald Reagan's military buildup gave an overwhelming advantage. And two, military and Pentagon leadership had previous formative battlefield experiences. The men who led this department during the Gulf War were mostly combat veterans of the Vietnam War. They said never again to mission creep or nebulous end states. The same holds true today. Our civilian and military leadership is chock full of veterans from Iraq and Afghanistan who say never again to nation building and nebulous end states. This clear-eyed view, all the way in the White House, combined with President Trump's military buildup, postures us for future victories if, and we will, and when we embrace the War Department. And we must. We are preparing every day. We have to be prepared for war, not for defense. We're training warriors, not defenders. We fight wars to win, not to defend. Defense is something you do all the time. It's inherently reactionary and can lead to overuse, overreach, and mission creep. War is something you do sparingly, on our own terms, and with clear aims. We fight to win. We unleash overwhelming and punishing violence on the enemy. We also don't fight with stupid rules of engagement. We untie the hands of our warfighters to intimidate, demoralize, hunt, and kill the enemies of our country. No more politically correct and overbearing rules of engagement. Just common sense, maximum lethality, and authority for warfighters. That's all I ever wanted as a platoon leader. And it's all my E6 squad leaders ever wanted, back to that E6 rule. We let our leaders fight their formations, and then we have their back. It's very simple, yet incredibly powerful. A few months ago, I was at the White House when President Trump announced his Liberation Day for America's trade policy. It was a landmark day. Well, today is another Liberation Day. The liberation of America's warriors, in name, in deed, and in authorities. You kill people and break things for a living. You are not politically correct and don't necessarily belong always in polite society. We are not an army of one. We are a joint force of millions of selfless Americans. We are warriors. We are purpose-built, not for fair weather, blue skies, or calm seas. We were built to load up in the back of helicopters, 5 tons, or Zodiacs, in the dead of night, in fair weather or foul, to go to dangerous places, to find those who would do our nation harm, and deliver justice on behalf of the American people in close and brutal combat, if necessary. You are different. We fight not because we hate what's in front of us. We fight because we love what's behind us. You see, the Ivy League faculty lounges will never understand us, and that's okay, because they could never do what you do. The media will mischaracterize us, and that's okay, because deep down they know the reason they can do what they do is you. In this profession, you feel comfortable inside the violence so that our citizens can live peacefully. Lethality is our calling card, and victory our only acceptable end state. In closing, a few weeks ago, at our monthly Pentagon Christian prayer service, I recited a commander's prayer. It's a simple yet meaningful prayer for wisdom for commanders and leaders. I encourage you to look it up if you've never seen it. But the prayer, it ends like this. And most of all, Lord, please keep my soldiers safe. Lead them, guide them, protect them, watch over them. And as you gave all of yourself for me, help me give all of myself for them. And amen. I have prayed this prayer many times since I've had the privilege of being your secretary. And I will continue to pray this prayer for each of you as you command and lead our nation's finest. Go forth and do good things, hard things. President Trump has your back, and so do I. And you'll hear from him shortly. Move out and draw fire, because we are the War Department. Godspeed.
Room, attention.
I was trying to hear if there was applause in that room. I think it's relatively silent there. I'm not sure whether that is customary with a group of admirals and generals there. But Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth just finishing up a speech to this unprecedented gathering of military leaders called in from around the world. There was some curiosity about why they were brought in. It seems it was for the Defense Secretary to relay to them the types of things that he has talked about for years, written about for years, including in his own book, which he cited in front of the generals and admirals about changing the culture within the military. He says ending the war on warriors and a lot of what that means. He set up this dichotomy between what he called the woke department, which is what he says the military was, and the war department, which is what he says he would like it to be. One of the things he told the gathering of generals and admirals is that he wants the military to be apolitical, but then he also told them that if the people in the room did not agree with what he was saying, they should do the honorable thing and resign. With us now is retired General Wesley Clark, former NATO Supreme Allied Commander. General, you had a chance to listen to that speech. What were your major takeaways? What did you think?
John, there were parts of that speech I really liked. And there was part of it that was political. I'll tell you what I really liked. We learned in Vietnam, and I was one of those men that fought in Vietnam and spent a lot of my career reflecting on it, that you should not commit American forces unless you commit them to a decisive objective and go in to win. I worked with General Colin Powell on the preparation for General John Wickham to become the Army Chief of Staff in '83, and we wrote that to General Wickham in his book, that his transition book, and that was the watchword of the Defense Department. Caspar Weinberger, with General Powell, was there. They put it in the Weinberger Doctrine. Yes, we did that in the Gulf War. That's exactly what we did. It was, in a sense, the Army's revenge for Vietnam. We won decisively. That was who we were. So I like that part of the speech. But the military has to serve overall national policy as well. So during the 1990s, after the collapse of the Soviet Union, we did use our forces in other means. We stopped slaughter in Rwanda. We used them to end a vicious war in Yugoslavia. We stopped ethnic cleansing in Yugoslavia twice with the use of military forces, created a new nation. After 9/11, the nation felt it was at war. We went to Afghanistan. That was a fight we had to have. Maybe it wasn't done right. We didn't actually get Osama bin Laden, but those men that went there were all trained by people who fought in Vietnam, by those of us who believed in decisive victory. We did win a decisive victory over the Taliban, just didn't know what to do with it. And those armed forces that went into Iraq in 2003, magnificent military performance getting to Baghdad. We knew those soldiers. Many of them had worked for me. My former aide de camp was a Silver Star winner. He led the assault into Baghdad. He was a warrior. Many of these people have retired, but we never felt that we were a woke military, didn't even know what it meant. We picked the best people for promotion, regardless of their race or gender. That was the standard. So I like what Hegseth said about lethality, warrior, winning, being decisive. General Milley, I thought, is a fine general. I think he certainly qualifies as a war fighter. So there's some politics mixed into what Secretary Hegseth said. But if he takes the armed forces forward, if he puts the emphasis on lethality, if he really does put the money out there to train and maintain, that's a great thing. And we need it because we're going into a very difficult period of time.
By the way, just so people know, you didn't just serve in Vietnam, you were wounded in Vietnam there. When you talk about Yugoslavia, you were NATO Supreme Allied Commander during the U.S. effort there, which really ended or went a long way to saving thousands of lives in that civil war. So you know what you're talking about. You brought up General Milley. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth name-checked General Milley. He basically said, out with the General Millleys, out with the General Peter Corellis, and in with the Pattons and Schwarzkopfs. He said, Admiral Stockdale as well, name checking them. And then he said that the military has basically been in decay. Do you feel like that's the sentiment in that room among the people who are listening?
You know, I think the people in that room, first of all, they're not going to applaud, John, because that's just not the way we're brought up. It wasn't supposed to be a political speech. They didn't take it as a political speech. They're not voting for Secretary Higgs, so you can't judge it by like a pep rally or something. They listened respectively. But I want to make one thing very clear to our viewers. The military does what the constitutional authority of the United States, what the leaders tell them to do. So if you didn't like the outcome in Afghanistan and Iraq and the Middle East, and you say, these are forever wars, look to the leadership. You know, if you announce a surge and then say, oh, but it's only going to last for 9 months and then we're going to pull everybody out, you got what you expected. If you try to do it on the cheap and not put the forces in, you get what you expected. When I was a lieutenant colonel, I was at the National War College in Washington, D.C., and one of my classmates was the son of the Army Chief of Staff from during the Vietnam War, and he said he wished he'd resigned during the Vietnam War because during the Vietnam War, we didn't commit our forces to win. There was this famous visit by Secretary McNamara back to Vietnam in 1993. And he had this dialogue with the North Vietnamese leadership. It was 30 years after the start of the war. And he said to the North Vietnamese leadership something like, you know, we could have destroyed you with our air power and we chose not to do. We tried to signal to you, don't do this. Why didn't you listen to our signals? We were very deliberate in telling you what we wanted. We picked our targets to give you the message. And the North Vietnamese generals said something like, we just thought your bombing was ineffective. And this was the 1965 Rolling Thunder campaign. And those of us who were in the military at that time and thought about it have spent years reconstructing in our minds, reading the documents, understanding the thinking about this. And it was wrong. And it was directed by political authorities, enforced on the armed forces. And people ask, why didn't the generals speak up? Why didn't the generals say that in 1964 we could have gone across the separation between North and South Vietnam, sealed off South Vietnam, cut the Ho Chi Minh Trail, and had a chance to bring into South Korea the same kind of freedom into South Vietnam, the same kind of freedom that South Korea established after the Korean War. But we didn't do that. So there's it's this civil military relationship. So I think the generals and admirals and they're concerned. There's a lot that's happened since Secretary Hegseth took over. 21 flag officers and admirals have been fired, many without explanation. But on the other hand, a lot of what he says is going to resonate and ring true to the men and women in that room. Because we are war fighters. We do want to go in. We want decisive objectives. We want to finish the job when we're put in there.
What do you think might change as a result of this speech?
Not clear. That's not clear because what we didn't get was the national policy. What looks like is coming out of the Pentagon is something that most of the men and women in the room would have real problems with. We know that Russia bears us no goodwill. Russia says it's at war with NATO right now. We can see what's happening to our long-term allies. And these are the people in Europe that are the greatest trade and investment partners of the United States. They're the anchor of U.S. foreign policy. If we want to manage the relationship with China, we need Europe on our side. And yet, there's this ambivalence in the Pentagon about, well, we're going to reduce the forces in Europe. We're going to focus on the southern border. We're going to do more with troops in the United States. That's what seems to be bubbling out. And so there's going to be a lot of concern about this new military strategy.
Retired General Wesley Clark, thank you so much for watching this speech alongside of us, helping explain some of what we saw there, especially at the end. Appreciate, as always, your expertise. Thank you, sir.